Hi there. In the last episode, I talked about 7 levels of test coverage I identify in my projects, and I hope that gave you some ideas on what to avoid and what to aim for in your applications. Let me know in the comments if testing in Ruby is an interesting topic you'd like to hear more about, and I'll continue with covering more tools helping to test applications efficiently. Today, I'll deep dive into one of the tools that can help you figure out where your application is currently. There are several code metric tools and quality checkers for Ruby available out there, and I hope I'll cover all of them at some point. So far, I covered the Rabocup in episode 23, which appears to be one of the most popular I published so far. Check it out if you're interested in how to ensure your code remains consistent within the project. Today, however, I'll focus on test coverage. In my application, it's a constant theme that I want and need to be aware of how good our test coverage is, whether to identify potential bug-prone places or to ensure the safe evolution of software, including refactoring. High-level test coverage is a must. Since I remember, I've used the Simplecov gem for that. It's a test coverage checker created by Krzysztof Olszówka back in 2011, and it's definitely one of the favorite tools I integrate with any Ruby project I work with. Krzysztof is also an author of the Ruby Toolbox project, so make sure you follow his work. This is another tool I use frequently. I have here a simple calculator inside of the Hanami application for dividing numbers by each other. In case of the latter value is a 0, it returns the message that argument is not allowed. I'd love to check if this class is well tested in my project to be sure I can refactor it freely without being afraid to introduce bugs in production. To do so, I'll leverage the power of the Simplecov gem. First, let me install it in my project. Now, having that, I can open the spec helper file and ensure that Simplecov will start every time I run my tests. It's important to place this code at the top of the file before all files are loaded to be sure that Simplecov properly tracks all our files. Now let's start our tests. At the very bottom of the output, you can see that the coverage report is now generated under the coverage folder. Let's take a look at it. I can clearly see that my divider is not fully covered by tests, but surprisingly, 80% seem to be covered. After clicking on it though, I get a detailed view on which lines were called of the class were called during my test run and which weren't. It clearly says that the only line that matters is missed, and the rest is called by the autoloading engine during the app boot time. This shows why having less than 80% line coverage in your application means nothing and makes it extremely bug prone. You may have most of your lines called by the application loading engine and still have nothing tested. Let me fix it then. Let me add a nice test example then. I just add one test for a call method that checks if calling the instance of my class with arguments 4 and 2 will result in a number of exactly 2. Now let me check the code generation again. It seems that my file is fully covered now. Isn't that great? But wait, have you spotted the problem? I have a one-line conditional here, but I only test one path of the condition. My code returns a message in case of passing a 0 as a divisor, and even though I don't have the test for that, I still get a full test coverage report. It happens because Simplecov by default is configured in a way to work with the line test coverage. This means that if a line of code is called during our test run, it's considered to be tested. It makes sense, but as you can see in this example, often it's not enough. This is where branch coverage comes in. Branch coverage is the type of check which covers all branches of my conditionals, no matter if they are in line or not. In case of any branch of the condition is not tested, the line is considered uncovered. To set this in my spec helper file, I need to enable the branch coverage using the appropriate configuration option. We can also set branch coverage to be the primary check for the test run. Now our report looks way more realistic. I get 50% of test coverage saying that my file has 2 different paths that my code can take and only one is tested. The rest is irrelevant. All lines being called by the loading engine do not affect the final result. Let me add the missing test then. I just need to add one more example, passing a 0 as a division and rerun all tests. Now my file is finally reported correctly. However, it's not all we can improve. Simplecov has no knowledge about our application. Therefore, by default, it just reports all files we have in the system, including all tests files. There is no need to have that in the report. At least I am not interested to check that all my tests had been run when I ran them all. To clean the report a bit, in the Simplecov configuration block, I'm going to add a simple filter to exclude all files placed in the spec folder. Now finally, after running my tests, the end result looks as expected, including only files that matter to me. Things are looking way better now, and I love this simple look at the start. But when I'm working on bigger applications, split into different teams, departments, I like to have a way of grouping the reports by files relevant to my part of the project. To achieve this, I need to add my group definitions to the Simplecov configuration, passing a name as a first argument, while the file path definition as a second one. Feel free to group by whatever works for you. In Hanami, however, grouping by slices makes the most sense to me. Adding these groups will result in new tabs appeared on the report, allowing me to filter only files relevant for the given group. Then, finally, during my regular workflow, I rarely run all tests in my project. Usually, I'm only interested in running the tests I'm writing for the current file, leaving the rest to the CI checks after pushing my changes to the server. Therefore, I like to only load and run Simplecov if there is an environment variable named coverage set. This allows me to only call coverage when needed, as well as set the CI checks to call it by default. My daily workflow is not slowed down by unnecessary redundant checks, and everyone is happy. Now the last thing I'd like to cover today is controlling the quality of your code over time. To ensure test coverage in projects I'm working on does not drop as the application grows, I'm usually setting a few additional rules in the config. The first is to set the minimum acceptable test coverage. Having that, if test coverage in my project drops below the accepted level, the test run returns an error. Usually, it means that the CI build fails to prevent PR to be merged until missing tests are added. Additionally, a good way to force a slow increment of test coverage is to add Refuse Coverage Drop option to the config. Having this, the build will always fail if the coverage is lower than before. I tend to have a badge in the project README file with the current test coverage percentage and refresh it after each merge to the main branch. This prevents any developer to open a PR that doesn't have enough tests and slowly forces the quality of the code to be increased. Simplecov is a nice guide to have an overview of how well tested our application is. As often happens in such great gems, I only scratch the surface of possibilities it allows though. There is a ton of documentation about how to speed up your checks when running tests in different processes, so potentially we can run tests for each slice separately, and Simplecov can easily match the final result to present the report correctly. If you like this video, hit a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content in this fashion, subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell. You can also subscribe to the newsletter and follow me on Twitter. I want to especially thank my recent sponsors, Akilas Yemane, Bill Tayin, and Benjamin Klotz. By helping me with a few dollars per month creating this content, you're helping the open source developers and maintainers to create amazing software for you. And remember, if you want to support my work even without money involved, the best you can do is to like, share, and comment on my episodes and discussion threads. Help me add value to the open source community. If you know other great gems you wish me to talk about, or have an amazing idea for upcoming episodes, please open a discussion using the GitHub discussion threads you can find at the bottom of any published article. As usual, here you can find 2 of my previous videos. Thank you all for supporting my channel. You are awesome, and have a nice rest of your day.